Hello everyone, and welcome to Undertale Track Analysis, a series where I will hopefully be able to dissect, deconstruct, and analyze all 101 tracks in the Undertale OST. With each episode, I will examine a multitude of aspects that makes each track unique. These aspects include melodic composition, leitmotif incorporation, placement in the game itself, choice of instruments used, etc. Now, I haven't really decided if I'm going to be making these videos in chronological order yet, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to be continuing this series after the first episode. But either way, I think it'd be fitting for the first episode of this new series to center around the first track of the game, Once Upon a Time. Standard warning, there will be spoilers in this video, and that will likely be the case for all the videos in this series, so make sure you've completed the game prior to watching this. And another notice, I don't really have any editing software, so this will be extremely rough. The quality of the visuals, at least, won't be anything special, so just bear with me on that. Hopefully that won't muddle the message, which is the more important part of the video. Anyway, onto the analysis. Now, the most important thing to note about the Once Upon a Time track is that it contains three major leitmotifs, each of which can be considered a separate section of the song. In case you don't know, a leitmotif is a short musical melody that recurs throughout a play, a musical, a video game, etc. For a more concrete hands-on demonstration of leitmotifs in the Undertale soundtrack at work, feel free to check out Jacob the Quiz Guy's channel, which I will link in the description. Anyway, for ease of reference, I will be referring to these three separate leitmotifs by their own distinct names: Introduction, Development, and Falling Action. I'll be using these names throughout the series if I do decide to continue it, just as a notice. So, first off, the Introduction leitmotif. Melodically speaking, this leitmotif is rather simple, composed using only 5 notes. The melody also doesn't move around the keyboard much, and is mostly confined to a single octave, as I will demonstrate right now. This user is RetroRed. He has made synesthesia tutorials for every single Undertale track, as far as I know. So if you'll notice these, the notes that in the right hand, that's the melody, while the left hand is the accompaniment, you'll notice that the notes in the right hand do not have much variety. There's a C, F, C, D, C, and G. And every single note in this melody is just those notes in a different order. And if you don't know what an octave is in music speak, that is, it is basically the distance between two notes of the same pitch. So if you take this note, which is a C, and you take this note, which is also a C, that distance between the notes is called an octave. And if I'll go back for a second, you'll notice that every single note, almost every single note, with the exception of this note, falls within the space between these two notes. So, in that sense, the leitmotif kind of lacks a musical direction. It kind of meanders around this little octave. And the effect of this simplicity and lack of musical direction is a feeling of expectation and anticipation. It leaves the listener questioning where the track is going to go from there, almost like the opening lines of a children's story and how it draws you in. Because of this, it makes sense why the introduction leitmotif is layered over the expository section of the opening sequence, where the history between the humans and monsters is explained. It piques the player's interest, leaving them curious as to where the story will go next. As you'll see here, this is the opening sequence of the game, which you see when booting up the game anytime you play. So, as you can see during this sequence, it's giving the background information about the world of Undertale. Like, there are 2 races that live in it, they had a battle, the monsters got locked underground with a barrier. It's like, this is sort of setting up this main story that's going to be told. And as the leitmotif is meant to sort of goad the player into trying to anticipate what's about to happen next, it makes sense why it's layered over these specific images. Moving right along to the development leitmotif. Oh, whoops. Please excuse that. This leitmotif is much more musically complex than the introduction leitmotif, utilizing a wider array of notes and incorporating several accidentals that do not harmonically fit within the key of the piece, as you'll see in this synesthesia tutorial. Let me just go back a bit. So, a little rundown of scales in music. They're kind of a complicated issue, but essentially there's sequences of notes that go together that make melodic and harmonic sense. In this case, the piece of Once Upon a Time is an F major. You don't really need to know what that means. You just need to know that this particular note, this B, it's not really meant to be in the F major scale. It doesn't really fit in there in terms of harmonics, but the fact that it's included in the piece nonetheless kind of adds a level of complexity in it. If you go back to the introduction leitmotif, all the notes in there fall within the F major harmonic scale, which lends to its simplicity, as I mentioned before. So, as you can see, these notes are not confined to a single octave. They kind of go all around the keyboard. Like there's the notes, as you can see, the notes cover more distance, quote unquote, than the introduction leitmotif. And there's also that E sharp, well, no, that's an E flat, but that's also a note that's not supposed to fit in the F major scale, and obviously that adds more complexity to the leitmotif, as discussed previously. Okay, so thanks to this musical complexity as opposed to the introduction leitmotif, the leitmotif carries with it a sort of nostalgic, sentimental tone, which once again captures the essence of a children's story being told to a group of children, as the Undertale is usually theorized to be. It's commonly suggested that the reason why it's called Undertale is like it's a tale being told to children, like it's a children's story. And to put it simply, the introduction leitmotif is simple. It sets the scene for the story that is about to be told, and the development leitmotif is the story itself. And thanks to all this, taking all this into consideration, it's understandable why the leitmotif is placed over the appearances of Mount Ebott and Chara, as well as the image of Chara falling into the mountain. These scenes are meant to advance the plot of Undertale, and they introduce the setting and the supposed main character of the game. At this point, you don't know that the child falling down the mountain is Chara. You think it's your player character. That plot twist is revealed later in the game. So notice how the introduction of the development leitmotif is layered specifically to start right as Mount Ebott is introduced in the shot. So as I mentioned, these scenes are meant to sort of like the exposition sequence in the opening sequence talks about the monsters, the humans, the war between them, the barrier and stuff, all this stuff that sets up the main plot, while this is actually these are the events that lead to your situation in the game, supposedly. This is what leads to these are the immediate events that cause the game to progress as they do. So finally, the falling action leitmotif. This leitmotif combines the musical complexity of the development leitmotif with the immobility of the introduction leitmotif. The notes it utilizes do not fall neatly into the harmonic key the piece is in, as I mentioned previously, but the leitmotif is also largely confined to a single octave like the introduction leitmotif, and consists of the same handful of notes being repeated. As you can see here, this B once again does not fit into the F major harmonic scale, but as you can see, the notes it uses mainly fall within this little interval of C to C. There's a couple of exceptions, but not as much as there was in the development leitmotif, which means it's not as simple, but it also it's not as complex as the development leitmotif, but it's also more complex than the introduction leitmotif. So this combination sort of creates a feeling of ambiguity and uncertainty. The exposition is out of the way, and the circumstances that lead up to the events of the game have been established, but now it's up to the player to decide what happens next. In regards to its placement in the game, this leitmotif plays over the image of Chara lying face down inside Mount Ebott, as the camera slowly pans upward and fades to black, accompanied by the leitmotif quietly fading away as well. You'll also notice around this time is when the drums, or the bass line of the leitmotif and the song itself sort of fades away as it fits with the fading to black of the introduction sequence and the appearance of the title screen. So These three leitmotifs, in tandem with the opening sequence of the game, are meant to set the tone of what's to come and ensure that the player is thoroughly engaged and emotionally connected to the story they are about to be told. This isn't the last time we'll be hearing these leitmotifs, far from it actually. These particular leitmotifs are perhaps the most iconic in the entire soundtrack, appearing in such outstanding, memorable tracks as Undertale, Hopes and Dreams, Fallen Down Reprise, etc. I'll delve more into the meaning of these leitmotifs as they relate to these specific tracks in their own separate episodes, but essentially these leitmotifs serve to embody the spirit of the game itself, in all of its emotional, complex, and nostalgic glory. One last thing to note about this track before I bring this episode to a close. Throughout the track, there is a distinct lack of quote-unquote real or organic instruments. The track is composed entirely of chiptune noises, like the kinds you hear in the old Mario or Legend of Zelda themes at NES, with no drums, no guitars, no pianos, or whatever other instruments are available. However, as the soundtrack progresses, more and more quote-unquote real instruments are added. Just take Megalovania as an example, which is filled with overpowering guitars, pounding drums, and choir voices, or Hopes and Dreams, which features the heartfelt playing of a violin, laid over a thunderous bass line and guitar backing. This progression of instruments creates a feeling of falling deeper and deeper into Undertale's world as you go further into the soundtrack. The innocent and unassuming layers are peeled away, and you eventually see all of what the game has to offer. Additionally, the usage of chiptune helps set up the player's expectation that Undertale will be nothing more than your standard retro-style RPG, with an entirely retro-style soundtrack to boot. This notion is completely blown out of the water, obviously, as events in the game, such as Omega Flowey's appearance, prove just how different of a game Undertale is. Undertale is a game that's based almost entirely around subversion, upending of your expectations, so it's only natural that the very first sound you hear upon booting up the game is meant to set up these expectations, only for them to be upended later. Well, that's all for this episode. Hopefully I'll be able to cover the second track in the game's start menu in the next episode. Thank you all for watching, and let me know if you enjoyed this sort of video in the comments below. I'm open to suggestions, so please feel free to leave your thoughts below. See you all next time.